Ahoy hoy, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So there have been quite a few new retro devices coming out in the last couple of months, to the point where it actually hurts my wallet a little bit. I am a small channel, and so I don't have any sponsorships or monetization yet. So every single device that I review, I'm actually paying for out of pocket with my hobby money. And so this little gem of a device caught my eye a few weeks ago, and it struck me as a pretty budget-friendly device, so I decided to grab it just because of how cute it actually looked. This is the PowKiddy RGB20S, and I spent about $80 on AliExpress to purchase this directly from the PowKiddy store. And I want to say shipping was about $15, so I paid about $95 altogether to ship from China to the US. So we're going to take this device through its paces, we're going to see what it's capable of, and we're going to see if it is worth that $80 to $100 price point, despite the fact that we're still rocking that antiquated RK3326 chipset. So with that, let's jump in and let's get started. So the PowKiddy RGB20S does seem quite boxier looking than most of the handhelds that are out there. It has some very oddly designed shoulder buttons that are meant for your index fingers to rest on, but I can't say it's a wholly comfortable experience. There's also a Wi-Fi on and off switch on the side, but this device doesn't actually have Wi-Fi built in. It's almost as though they were planning on building in the Wi-Fi, but then decided for cost reasons to not do it. Which is a really weird decision, because at that point you should just get rid of the toggle. Other than that, the analog sticks feel pretty good. They're switch style, and they do click in L3 and R3, and the D-pad and the face buttons are not uncomfortable either. They are pretty decent to use. Taking a quick drive into Spec Town, what we have here is a 3.5-inch IPS OCA laminated screen with a 640 by 480 resolution. We have that dated RK3326 processor, about 1 gigabyte of RAM, and a 3500 milliamp battery, which means we'll probably get everything up to PlayStation 1, which will be perfect emulation, and then the rest is going to be choppy from there. We might get some N64 and Dreamcast out of this, but experience with those systems is definitely going to be choppy at best. However, I have to say the draw to me wanting to purchase this device was actually not the specs. It was the fact that I really love DMG style handhelds, but I also love this adorable tiger sticker that came with it. And I don't want to say that I bought a retro handheld for a sticker, but I kind of bought the retro handheld for a sticker. Now, early shipments of this model had a typo where the start and select words were actually in the wrong place, but I'm happy to report that when I got mine, the select and start text are actually where they need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and peel off this sticker carefully, making sure that I get the holes for the analog sticks and the D-pad and buttons set up properly, and we're gonna go ahead and put this sticker on. Now, it doesn't sit perfectly, and I actually had to try a couple of different times to actually get this to adhere properly so that all the speaker holes and button holes are properly aligned. I did have to get a knife to poke out the parts of the sticker that were covering the speaker holes, but once I had everything in place, I was happy with the way it looked. And honestly, I know I'm a giant kid, but speaking seriously for a minute here, this is a device that you may be okay buying and handing off to a child or a nephew or a niece or something like that. And despite the fact that this device does seem kind of like a cheapy plastic device, I'm really enamored by this tiger sticker. And I don't know why having a sticker that fits on the device's buttons and just looks really cute made this a day one purchase for me, but it did, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Alright, let's fire this thing up and see what the out-of-the-box experience is like. And right off the bat, I have to tell you, it takes about 60 seconds from startup to menu screen, and I'm used to higher end devices at this point, like the Steam Deck and the Odin. So to go back to a device that takes a full minute to start up like this was a little bit jarring, but it is an unfortunate consequence of the chipset that we are using, as well as the paltry 1 GB of RAM that's in this device. And out of the box here, we're running a modified version of the ArcOS custom firmware. It's basically ArcOS with some PowKiddy stuff on top of it. And this device does run on a dual SD card system, which means there is one SD card strictly for the operating system, and a second SD card where you would put your ROM files. And so PowKiddy did put some ROM files on here and seems to have somewhat scraped them, because there is box art and videos, but then there's also PowKiddy's very odd naming conventions. But you will get some ROMs if you buy this device and just turn it on and don't plan on modding it, even though I don't necessarily agree with the practice of including ROM files on a device due to copyright and legality. At least if you do purchase this device, you will have games that you can play right out of the gate. And the early arcade systems, as well as early Nintendo and Sega systems, will work just fine. Here's the arcade version of Arachnoid, and it seems to be running just fine with a 4:3 resolution, using the MAME 2003 core. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because here is Power Stone 2 for Naomi, which is running on the Flycast core. And you can already tell it's choppy and there's a lot of audio stuttering, so it kind of surprises me why they decided to put Naomi Atomiswave and Dreamcast games on this device by default, because it really doesn't show the best of what a system like this has to offer. Where a device like this really shines is on 4:3 content like NES. More than likely, that's what I'm going to treat this device as, an NES, SNES, and Sega Genesis machine, because I know that that content will look really good on this device. However, this does present a small problem, because I already have a device that's capable of producing great NES content and a 4:3 screen, with an RK3326 chipset, which is the Anbernic RG351V. And the screens here are very comparable. The 351V seems to have a slightly less bright screen, or at very least the background looks a little bit more orange, whereas it looks a little bit brighter and more yellow on the PowKiddy RGB20S. But to me, these screens seem identical, and these devices are kind of identical as well. But what sets the RG351V apart from the RGB20S is it is a lot more comfortable to hold. It's a little bit heftier, the weight feels more evenly distributed, and it's easier to find places for your index fingers to rest. And the 351V just feels a little bit more premium for about $10, $20 more, depending on if there are sales or not. However, the RGB20S does have that second analog joystick, which makes it easier to play those few N64 games that do work on this chipset, as well as ports like the Super Mario 64 port. But the 351V has been out for a while now and does a lot of the same things as the RGB20S. So if you already own a 351V, getting the RGB20S might not be the best idea, Tiger Sticker or not. Here is a three-way comparison between the RGB20S, the RG351V, and the Analog Pocket for Game Boy emulation. And obviously the Analog Pocket has an official cartridge, whereas the other two devices are merely emulating a ROM. But as far as screen quality goes, the RGB20S does hold its own against these other two devices. However, if we're going to talk about budget to functionality, the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus is probably this device's biggest competitor. And actually, one might argue that it really isn't a competition at all. The Retroid Pocket 2 Plus has the same size screen, but it has a much better processor. It runs on Android 9, and it is capable of running more systems at a stable frame rate than the dated chipset in the RGB20S. And yet, both of these systems are on or around a similar price point. However, there is one thing to note. The PowKiddy RGB20S does have two actual analog sticks, whereas the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus only has the analog slider on the right. And I'm not quite sure if that's necessarily a deal breaker for a lot of people, but just keep in mind both of these devices can be purchased at around a similar price point, but one is more capable than the other. Now, I wanted to swap out the SD cards on this device for more reliable ones. So what I ended up doing was flashing this 32GB SD card with the Anbernic RG351MP version of ArcOS. And then I took a 256GB SD card that I had kicking around, and I put my ROM files on here. And the 351MP build of ArcOS did work. However, when I went into options and tried to mount the second SD card, it wouldn't work, and I couldn't figure out why, because I tried a 256 and I tried a 128, and neither of them worked. And I was about ready to give up, but I did have one more micro SD card kicking around, and it was a 64GB card, so I decided to try it just to see if it would actually work. And that one did work. I was able to mount that as the second SD card, and I was able to get my ROM files to work off of the SD2, so I don't know why higher capacity cards are not working. And unless that's fixed, I actually have to take a lot of points off of this device, because at the $80 to $100 price point, there are better retro devices that will recognize higher capacity SD cards like the RG351V. And that kind of begs the question, are you willing to spend a little bit less to the same amount of money for a device that is actually inferior to the RG351V just because it has an extra analog stick and a Tiger sticker? And I can't exactly answer this question for you, but it is something that you need to keep in mind when considering this device over others. So I'm just going to showcase a little bit of gameplay here for the higher end systems just to show you what you're looking at with this device performance-wise. Using the Flycast standalone emulator, I was able to get Ikaruga running pretty decently, but this is where my successful testing ended. I couldn't really get any other Dreamcast games to boot. I think that might be an issue with the way my ROMs are set up though, so your mileage may vary as far as Dreamcast performance and compatibility. And unfortunately, the more I used this device, the less and less enamored I became with it. There were some really bad graphical issues when trying to play Kirby 64 using the RetroArch core. So I went into the emulator settings and I changed Nintendo 64 to the Rice standalone core, hoping that I would get better performance. And I did to an extent. Things did perform a little bit better, but there are still some weird graphical issues and the game just didn't look great. And I was expecting to actually enjoy my N64 experience with this device, mostly because I have access to that second analog stick, but the more I played it, the more I realized that second analog stick is just oddly positioned, and it's really hard to actually utilize it properly when playing N64. And my issues actually didn't stop with Kirby. When I played Star Fox 64 and I tried to use the right analog as the C buttons, the buttons weren't mapped to what they were supposed to be. So left was down and down was up, and it just was not an enjoyable experience. And because I'm using a standalone, there is no way to map those controls to something else. However, there are some positives to talk about here. I was able to, because I was running a build of ArcOS, take all of my ArcOS ports from my RG351V and just copy and paste them right over, and the vast majority of my ports did work right out of the gate. So for example, here I booted up my Sonic the Hedgehog 1 port that I had configured on my 351V, and it just turned on and I was able to go into the game, and even my save was there from my other device. And Shovel Knight was another example. And if you do go with the RG351MP build of ArcOS and you put it in your PowKiddy RGB20S, then you will get access to Portmaster. However, because this device does not have a built-in Wi-Fi card like it seems like it was supposed to, you may have to manually add the Portmaster files to your SD card or use an external Wi-Fi dongle. But if you can get over that hurdle, you can use this device for ports. And they do run as well as you would expect them to run on an RK3326 device. Alright, let's talk about Commendations and Condemnations. Let's talk about Commendations first, and I have to point out the tiger sticker yet again, only because literally the tiger sticker alone was a big deciding factor as to whether I should get this device or not, and I'm a little ashamed to say it, but yeah, I bought a device based on a tiger sticker, which I think I said earlier in this video as well. However, it does have two fully functioning analog sticks with L3 and R3, and that is both a good thing and a bad thing. However, I am going to acknowledge in this section of the video that they did include two analog sticks, whereas other devices will either have one or none. And this device does unintentionally run some custom firmware meant for other devices, so you can get ArcOS and you can also get 351 Elec running on this. And even if not, the stock SD card that comes with this device is a modified version of ArcOS, which does allow you to play some native ports like Shovel Knight and AM2R. And I will applaud any device that makes the decision to have a front-facing speaker, because I do want that sound coming right at me. I don't want it pointed away from me or down. And these are the things that this device does get right. However, let's talk about Condemnations, because this device also has a lot that it needs to improve upon. And I'm gonna start with the tiger in the room. Why did they put a Wi-Fi toggle on this device if they were not going to include Wi-Fi on the device itself? It kind of seems like they originally were planning on using Wi-Fi, and then somewhere along the line, maybe there was a parts shortage, and they just continued to manufacture the device without the chip in it. And when I first got this device, I was actually pretty thrilled that it had two analog sticks until I started playing games that needed two analog sticks, and I found that moving my thumb from the buttons to the right analog just was clunky and weird, and it didn't feel right, and it actually made some games harder to play. So while I am thrilled that they did attempt to put two analog sticks on this device, I'm a little upset that I can't use them the way that they're meant to be used. And I don't know why I had trouble with the standalone N64 emulator as far as the C buttons went, but the inability to remap those buttons on a standalone emulator did make fun games like Star Fox 64 a little bit more of a chore. And it's interesting in the middle of 2022 that we're still getting RK3326 processor systems when I have retro handhelds that could play the systems that are available on this device much better and then play additional newer systems on top of it. So for this price, you can get the RG351V, which is just an overall better built device with the same chipset as the PowKiddy RGB20S, or you can settle for the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, which has a better chipset at around the same price point. And now let's add the caveat that I was only able to get small capacity SD cards to work on this device, and something like the RG351V is a lot more palatable because those devices can take bigger SD cards and they still have a dual SD setup. And that makes this device overall a much harder sell. So ultimately, I think your decision as to whether you should get this device or not hinges on whether you want a Tiger sticker or not. Or maybe you're looking to save a few dollars and this device plays what you want it to play, and it might be slightly cheaper than some of the other options out there. However, I think if you're looking to spend about $80 on a retro device, you might be better served budgeting an extra $20 or $30 and getting something that either has the same performance but better build quality, or has a slightly better chipset and has the capability to emulate more systems. And I'm just going to end here on a personal note. This is my third PowKiddy device, and I actually have given away the other two because ultimately I'm finding that when it comes to PowKiddy devices, for me personally, they just kind of miss the mark a little too much. And I ultimately end up finding other handhelds made by different companies that do a better job. However, if you are building or getting one of these retro devices to give to a kid or give away as a gift, this device might check off all the boxes for the person that you are gifting it to. Or if you just happen to be a collector of retro devices, sure, this will look cute among your collection. And that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave your questions and thoughts in the comments below, and please feel free to continue the discussion in the Budget Aquaman Discord. Link will be in the video description. Again, thank you for watching, and if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.